Welcome to Dungeon Academics. My name is Thomas and I will be your instructor. Bold statement time. Thulsa Doom was right. If you are unaware of Thulsa Doom or are perhaps unsure about who he is or why he was right, Thulsa Doom is the antagonist in the 1982 classic Conan the Barbarian, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger and based on the book by Robert E. Howard. A book that I have not yet read but is on my library waiting list, so hopefully that will be arriving soon enough. The film is an absolute classic of the swords and sorcery genre. Many credit it with the revival in the 1980s of the genre, and the original book created the literary genre in the 1930s, I believe. And certainly it's the film that launched Arnold Schwarzenegger's career. I mean, this is an absolutely classic film. It is definitely 18 rated, or R rated if you're American, so not one that's suitable for the younger children, not by a long means, but it's a fantastic film. I love it, and it really sort of awakened a spirit of adventurousness and a love of the fantasy genre and the sort of swords and sorcery genre in me when I saw it when I was younger. Thulsa Doom's the bad guy, and in the film they talk about the Riddle of Flesh and the Riddle of Steel, and Thulsa Doom said steel is nothing, flesh is the source of power. And he's right, and I'd like to explain why. A couple of years ago, I was writing a rule mechanic for relic weaponry. I called it My Father's Sword. The idea being that you had a personal weapon that would grow with you. Every time you leveled up, you would be able to get that weapon improved somehow to get some additional little perk in combat. Now, a lot of this has been somewhat replicated by the introduction of the weapon mastery rules in the 2024 version of Dungeons & Dragons, though there was a lot more flexibility and meta choice in the set that I wrote, in that every time you leveled up, and including on character creation, you'd get a small bonus. That meant there were 20 little perks that you could add to your weapon. They were themed along strength, skill, defense, aggression, those kind of themes. So you could build weapons that were really good at getting crits, did more damage on crits, or did more reliable damage overall, or were more reliable to hit, or gave you some sort of defensive bonus. And I quite like the system, but I've abandoned it. I've abandoned it for a number of reasons. Firstly, it added a lot of additional book work. So when you were making an attack, you would have 5 or 6 different little sub-properties that you wanted to add on, and that slowed things down too much. I still have a philosophy of damage, and when you make an attack, it should do a bit of damage and then 1 or 2 other things as well. Normally 1, 2 in special occasions, maybe like critical hits. But having 3 or 4 extra bits on every attack feels like a bit too much to me. And secondly, it only really adds meta choice, that you are adding choices that just happen when you make an attack, not choices that you make once you've made an attack. I would much rather have a set of abilities that your character knows, and every time they land an attack, they can go, you know what, I'm going to use this little ability. And on the next attack, they might go, oh, well, I'm going to use this different ability. Rather than, I get to use this ability on every single attack 3 times in a turn. Meta choice is really not my thing, and I've talked about it so many times in other videos, you probably figured that out. So a system that just adds lots of meta choices is not good for me. I prefer my iteration of the weapon masteries where you have a set of special abilities, you might call them maneuvers or special moves, that you can do, and you can add 1 to each attack, occasionally 2 under special circumstances. And you even get a bonus for using multiple different ones in a turn, so you're not doing the same thing again and again. My personal preference for playing style, and I think most people might end up enjoying this, is to encourage players to do different things each turn. In fact, do different things with each attack. Rather than doing the same attack with the same bonuses and the same effects 3 times a turn on the same target, I've personally found it more enjoyable to be in a situation where I'm trying to attack as many different targets in as many different ways as possible. Now, the current game is set up to reward players who optimize and have a best attack and do that exclusively, and where the entire team dogpiles onto the same enemy until it is dead and then dogpiles onto a new target. Because of the way that Dungeons and Dragons works on a mechanical level, there is no benefit to having 2 targets at half wounds when instead you could completely kill 1 target and take it out of the game. The action economy encourages you to concentrate all your attacks on a single target, for the entire team to concentrate all their attacks on a single target until it is dead, and then together move on to the next one. And if you have a most efficient attack, you are rewarded by using that attack exclusively. I want to break this system. I want to have a system where it's encouraged for the players to attack as many different targets as possible with as many different attacks as possible, so you are doing more different stuff. And now there is choices. Rather than I will attack with the same attack on the same target, it's which targets can I attack, which attacks do I want to use, and I'm being rewarded for creative thought here. I like this. And if you look at the great battles and fight scenes from cinema and TV, this is what they look like. It's not just 2 people wailing on each other with the same attack again and again and again. The action is dynamic. Even if it's not a one-on-one fight, the hero is trying to attack 3 different targets at the same time, trying to fend them off. They are making different attacks. They are hitting someone with the sword, kicking an enemy away, pulling a dagger out of their belt and stabbing it into someone else, picking up a convenient clay pot and smashing it over another target's head. Even if they've got a sword in their hand, even if they've got their own relic sword in their hand, occasionally a quick stab to the gut with an offhand knife or a pottery shard to the head is a better move to make in those circumstances. It makes for a more interesting fight. Hell, if you look at the duel scene from The Princess Bride, one-on-one fight between the man in the black mask and Inigo Montoya, they are moving around the battlefield. They are trying different attacks against each other and even talking about what they're doing and how they're trying to switch things up. And I think it's one of the best fight scenes, or one of the best duels in cinema history. I want combat in Dungeons and Dragons to be like that. And I think having abilities attached to the player rather than the weapon is the way to do it. It is not the sword that is mighty. It is the hand that wields the sword that does the trick. And that is the Riddle of Flesh. It is the flesh, not the steel, that is the source of your strength. Does this mean I want to get rid of magic weapons entirely? Of course not. Magic weapons and relic weapons and special weapons are such an integral part of the fantasy genre that absolutely I want to keep them. If you think about the great works of fantasy, they almost always include some legendary weapon or family weapon. Excalibur, the One Ring, that's not a weapon, but you know what I mean. Aragon's sword, I can't remember the name of it now, the fancy one that gets reforged. I mean, these are iconic parts of the story, and I want to keep these in. I want to have players having their favourite weapon. But I want to make a system where they're not going to use that weapon for every single attack against every single enemy. I want there to be times when they go, that +2 greatsword is staying in its sheath on my back because this target calls for hammers. And even then, hammer in one hand, axe in the other. Occasionally there's going to be a time where I'm going to pull a stiletto as well, or give something a kick, or a headbutt, or smack it with a shield, or pick up a branch and break it over something's head. Some crazy dynamic combat. That's how I want the system to work. You can have your favourite magic weapon, and you can use that in association with other things as well. It's just occasionally it's not going to be your primary weapon for different combats. Sometimes there might be more suitable tools. And I'd like to have a situation where players can have, well, I've got my +2 sword, but I still want to have that +1 axe and that +1 hammer as well, because there's going to be a time when I want to use all of them. Having a diversity of magical weapons available makes sense. Under the current system, if you've got a good magic weapon, every other magic weapon that's not better is useless. It serves no purpose for you other than to sell it and get gold. Unless, of course, it is a better magic weapon for someone else who doesn't have one that good already. If every magic weapon becomes valuable to every player, then all magic weapons become more valuable. And I think that's the world that I want to live in. That's a fantasy world that I want to live in. I mean, to give an example, in my D&D game last week, I was awarded from a random loot table braces of archery. My character's Spellblade, Hexblade, Bladesinger Wizard, multiclass. And I thought to myself, I have no use for this. It's +1 attack and +1 damage with bows and short bows. I don't even own a bow. So I turned to the rest of the table and said, look, I've been given this, but does anyone else want it? And everyone went, no, I don't have a bow or a short bow. No one on the table used bows or short bows. We had one fighter character, but he's exclusively a melee fighter, doesn't even have a crossbow, doesn't even want a crossbow. If the character is not in melee, they're not going to stop and shoot, they're going to dash to get into combat. We have a bard character who uses cantrips and spells for damage. Definitely does not want to get involved in a fight. We have a tiefling who's an Eldritch Blaster. My character has Eldritch Blast as well. And then we have a luchador homebrew class who, again, melee fighter, not interested. And finally, we've got a druid who doesn't carry a bow and doesn't want a bow. So what use is that magic item to our party? Literally none. I mean, if you gave me a regular short bow with a +1 to hit and +1 damage from that braces of archery, I'm still going to use Eldritch Blast if I need to do a ranged attack, because I get to do 2 Eldritch Blasts at level 5. I'm not at level 5 yet. That doesn't matter. But I'm not gonna use a short bow in favor of Eldritch Blast. Even if you make the target resistant to force damage, Eldritch Blast plus Agonizing Blast is probably still going to be a better choice than a short bow with +1 to hit and +1 damage. Certainly it's got a better range. I don't have to worry about disadvantage on long range. What you'd have to do is you'd have to make the target resistant to force damage and vulnerable to piercing damage, and now that short bow is a better choice. And if you make that target resistant to piercing damage, well, everyone who's got a sword or a spear or some other piercing attack is going to have a field day with it. So my short bow really doesn't make much of a difference. That's a different matter. I don't like random loot tables. Rather than roll on them, you pick a piece of loot that's suitable for the player, or modify what they roll so it's more appropriate to their individual needs. But under a system where you're encouraged to use different weapons and different attacks, those braces of archery are suddenly much more useful. If I get to be in a situation where I can do a short bow attack and an Eldritch Blast, that's going to be a diversity of attacks. And a Bladesinger wizard, when they get their level 6 feature, can do an attack and a cantrip. And doing a bow shot and an Eldritch Blast would be fantastic. I'd love to do that. And I would enjoy doing that because it's me doing 2 different attacks, possibly against 3 targets in the same turn. And like I said before, that's what I want to do. So that's my thought on things. I like special abilities that are attached to the player, not the weapon, because that frees the player up to make more choices about what they're doing. This doesn't mean I want to get rid of magic weapons, but the strength is in the flesh, not the steel. Thank you for coming along with me on this journey, and enjoy your next game, whatever it may be.